Thanks for joining us tonight. Going to go over a brief overview of the rules and regulations on coyote and fur bearers here in Kansas. After that, we're going to have lots of time for questions. Some of you are probably here for the new night hunting regulations. We're going to go over that, but for the most part, my talk up here is going to be pretty short and sweet, and usually the question and answer is where most people get the most good out of it. If you got any questions as I go along, feel free to ask. Pretty laid back. If I can figure out this. All right, here in Kansas, our fur bearers, you can see them listed up here: badger, bobcat, beaver, gray fox, red fox, swift fox, mink, muskrat, possum, otter, coon, striped skunk, and weasel. Okay? A lot of people think coyotes as fur bearers because we use them for their fur. As far as legal definition, coyote is not a fur bearer. It's just their own category. They have their own set of rules, or lack of rules for the most part, compared to a fur bearer. So the licenses you need for coyotes: you need a hunting license to hunt them, a fur harvester license to trap them, and then the new night vision equipment permit, I think is the official name for it, to hunt them at night during this new season that we're going to talk about here in a little bit with artificial light night vision thermals. Fur bearers, whether you're hunting or trapping them, you need the fur harvester license. And then anyone born after July 1st of '66 needs to complete a fur harvester education class unless you're trapping or hunting on your own land. And that, you're also exempt from the hunting and fur harvester license if you're on your own land. Legal equipment. We can go into as much detail on this as you guys want to. The hunting's pretty straightforward. There's firearms and archery. For trapping, it gets a little more complicated. These are your most prevalent: the smooth-jawed foothold traps, just your regular foothold trap. Body gripping or conibear traps, box traps, cage traps, snares, colony traps, which is just for muskrat, and then deadfalls. And of course, you can use calls, lures, baits, decoys, dogs to hunt also. Okay, season. As most of you probably know, coyote season's open year-round, no season. Fur bearers for this year is November 18th to February 15th. Beaver and otter goes on to the end of March. And that's for hunting and trapping. Okay. Use of artificial light, night vision, or thermals. Okay. This is the new deal that just passed back in August. I think the commission passed it. It does go into effect January 1st through March 31st. Several reasons behind that, but that's what they decided on. You do need the night vision equipment permit. It's a couple of bucks. And that couple of bucks is just what our licensed vendor charges us, or it would be free. It's to keep track and try to get some data from who's doing it, how many people are doing it. I'm sure surveys will be sent out afterwards to gather information on how effective it was and what all you're seeing out there. That's the main reason we're going to have that permit. The rules that go along with this new season, the biggest things: it's not allowed on any department public lands, and that includes the walk-in hunting areas. Okay. Can't be used in conjunction with hunting from a vehicle. Most people know that you can hunt coyotes from a vehicle year-round, and they don't have any shooting hours on coyotes, so technically 24 hours a day. But once you start using the night vision thermals for artificial light, it can't be from a vehicle, and that's just to keep people from driving around spotlighting, any animal, whether that be deer, bobcats, coyotes, from a vehicle. It's just like hound hunters for raccoons. You can't drive around and spotlight out of your vehicle, you actually have to have a raccoon tree before you can use your light to shoot them. So that's in place to prevent that. And lastly, this is for coyotes only. Doesn't include raccoons, bobcats, fox, all that big list of fur bearers that I had up there earlier. It's just coyotes only. Any questions? That was just a brief.
Is there a caliber size for the knife?
There's not. It's any caliber. Do you know, Steve, did they discuss that?
I haven't heard anything about that.
Anything else? Can we hear questions from internet land?
Oh.
I don't know how that works.
Me either.
Game wardens aren't too technological savvy. Drive around by ourselves a lot.
Radio blasting. What dog you got?
Got a yellow lab
Freezer.
for work.
Okay.
Yep. Human tracking, wildlife detection, and evidence recovery.
So far,
You
we're
say it
good.
starts January 1?
Yeah.
So what about when we're calving, we have coyote problems, we're good to.
Contact your game warden if you're in. Just give me a call.
Kingman County.
Yeah, give me a shout. You calve in the fall
All the time.
all the time. Okay. That's one reason they put it those months. A lot of folks calve.
That's what calving now. So,
Yeah. Just get with me and we'll get something figured out. I usually work with folks on that.
So far, we're clear in the chat.
What's that?
We're clear in the chat. There's no questions on
Oh,
internet.
it's gonna be really quick. You guys don't have any questions?
What prompted the change in the night?
I think mostly just public outcry. I mean, everybody was wanting it, from what I can tell. The folks that were wanting to hunt them, and then ranchers that were wanting to do something about depredation issues.
We do have a question.
Okay.
Is there a limit on coyotes, how many you can get?
No limit on coyotes. No season, no daily limit or season limit. Open year round.
No bounty?
Not anymore. Now, and prices the last couple of years at least have been pretty good on coyotes. So I haven't really needed them.
Is your kids, are they exempt from having to have a special permit?
To hunt, no, everybody would need the night vision, night hunting. Yeah.
Say somebody comes along that is visiting out of state, they can go observe the hunt, couldn't they?
As long as they're not participating. Yeah, and that's the same for hunting license.
Yeah.
Any species.
We got another one.
All right.
Where do you get lights from or lighters from?
The lights for hunting, any retail store that you would buy hunting equipment at, you know, the big names would have it. Cabela's, Bass Pro. They've been carrying it for years, even though it hasn't been legal in Kansas. It's legal in other states. Yeah, there's no specifications on what kind. You use green light, red light, white light, night vision, scopes, handheld night vision, same with thermals.
You can't have it attached to your rifle?
Yeah, you can. probably safer that way, honestly, if you're gonna use them.
Okay, we're good.
Good?
Yep.
All right. No more questions? All right, I'll give the floor to our area biologist, wildlife biologist, Steve Adams.
I'm Steve Adams, a biologist for wildlife and parks, and tonight I'm just going to talk some biology of the coyote, and then I'll have a few slides at the end. I want to talk about another predator that has been documented in Kansas, the mountain lion. Just a kind of an update, just a few slides on that, and kind of what Scott was just saying, you know, on the spotlights and those. We ran a spotlight deer survey last night in Reno County. And I can tell you, and I've noticed this for years, but the coyotes react at night with a spotlight the exact same way they do when you see them during the day. I mean, they're not going to stand there and look at you. They take off. I mean, and we saw quite a few coyotes last night on our deer survey. Just some life history of the coyote. As you can see, 25, 35 pounds. 3 to 5 year lifespan. Reproduction, they mate in February and March, pups in April and May, and after they're born, they're pretty mobile at 1 month. Then those pups will start dispersing that fall, that same fall. And just, I'm sure everyone knows, but sometimes there is some confusion between if someone sees a coyote and a fox. So the red fox that we have around here doesn't always look like that bright red. Sometimes they're a lighter color. This slide kind of shows the expansion of the coyote's range. All that red is kind of historically, that's around 1900 where they were historically. And as you can see, they have spread all across the eastern United States, up into Canada, clear down into southeastern U.S. They're generalists. They can survive about anywhere, and they just really expanded their range. Average litter, 6 pups, and the young females will breed in their 2nd year. One of the, I think, coolest things about the coyotes is the compensatory mentality. And basically what that means is in times when there's plenty of food and maybe their populations are down a little bit, that female may have 8, 10 pups. She can increase her litter size. If their populations are already really high, maybe there's not as much food out there for them, they can lower their number of pups they have. Pretty amazing what they can do. The home range of the coyote, I looked up, there's a lot of different studies I looked and tried to come up with something that, I could present tonight. A couple Kansas studies, really it's not that large of a home range, 750 to 1,000 acres. Other places, Northwest Montana, Wyoming, there were some places where they had 8 to 15 square miles of their home range. And also I won't talk about it much, but in urban areas, they're starting to do a lot of studies on urban coyotes because coyotes have moved into towns and they're causing all kinds of problems. And you can see here, one coyote has somebody's pet cat, Fluffy there. They kind of look, and I'm from Hutchinson, and we even have quite a few complaints of coyotes in the city limits of Hutchinson. And that is one of the biggest things. People can't figure out what's happening to their pets, but I've looked at some people have called me and I've gone down there, and everybody knows how coyotes react when you see them in the country. I mean, they are just gone. These coyotes have lost their fear of humans. They're in town. They're got everything they need. So that's something that's becoming more and more of an issue all the time. And I'll talk about the difference between transient coyotes and resident coyotes. It's about half and half. Generally in an area, you know, if you're hearing coyotes at night and they're there all the time, that's probably a dominant pair, and they're residents. That's their home range. But about half the coyotes are younger, or maybe even real old ones that have lost their dominant position, and they call those transients. They have a much larger home range, and they're just traveling back and forth a lot of times. So hunting and trapping, sometimes those are the ones that you catch the most, you see the most, they're moving more. Whereas those resident ones have the den, you know, are staying closer to that area. The resident ones are also, they're better shape physically, they're the dominant coyotes, and they are the ones that generally cause the problems with livestock losses. And in one study, a coyote traveled 8 miles in a straight line upwind to a carcass that was in a field that had been there a while. So that's one of the things I'll talk about here in a little bit. Is eliminating some of those problems is picking up carcasses and anything that might bring those coyotes in. And historically, coyotes have been hunted and trapped and forever. I mean, we've been trying to get rid of them. And, there were bounties, cyanide guns, strychnine. There was all kinds of poisons that killed a lot of other non-target species. And that's why, we can't use those types of things anymore. Plus, it was completely ineffective. And one of the things somebody over here mentioned calving. A lot of times, as I said, those resident coyotes can be the most detrimental. So a lot of times on predator control, it can be more effective if you do it right before, during, and after the calving season. Because if you get rid of those dominant coyotes, another transient coyote will come in and take over that range. But it might take a little while. So at least you wouldn't have any right there around your calving situation, So a lot of people don't, if they're calving later, I don't know if they don't think about predator control, but it would be better. And the same is true for wildlife. Fawn predation is kind of something that a lot of people ask about. And most of the fawns are born the first couple of weeks in June, which is kind of out of the time when most people are trying to control coyotes. But if that is your concern, I would go out and do some predator control, right before and after those fawns are born in June. And they make a lot of these predator calls. I've never used one, but from what I hear, they're very effective. But just like with anything, when you're dealing with coyotes, they will figure it out, if you hunt that same area over. They're very smart, and they'll figure that out. Another thing, if you're predator control, this little fawn decoy, and use a fawn bleat or something, those coyotes know when those does are having fawns, and they'll actively hunt those fawns. So that could be real effective too, out in the middle of the field, just a fawn decoy with a fawn call. Oh, and as I mentioned, those dominant pair are very territorial, and so right before they're getting ready, when they're breeding and before they're getting ready to have their pups, February, March, April, I think the coyotes are more susceptible to those vocalizations because they think a coyote vocalization, they think there's another coyote in the area rather than just a distress call. If they know that there's another coyote in the area, they're going to go to that sound. So that's something that could be a little more effective too. honestly, trapping and hunting is limited to success on controlling the predation on fawns and livestock sometimes. And so, you know, those resident coyotes, generally predation on livestock is not that significant. Now, I know anybody who's livestock producer, one is significant, and that's too many. But in the overall picture, you know, there's been it's just, they don't want to expend that much energy. But those resident pairs sometimes will start hunting in pairs, and those are the ones that can cause some significant losses to livestock. And I mentioned, you know, some of the things you can do is remove the carcasses right away, and pasture selection. If you're in an area where the coyotes have figured it out and they are getting in your livestock, you know, you may just want to look at, you know, picking out a different pasture if it's a possibility. Lights and even a vehicle parked out there where you're calving, has shown that those coyotes will avoid that area for a while. Again, they'll figure it out, but you know, just at randomly you park a vehicle out there, that may prevent some predation on calves. Propane cannon, you know, I have a couple of those, and mostly I provide those to landowners that are having geese problems. They'll come in, you know, thousands and thousands of geese, and that works great for a few days, and then they get used to it. Same way with coyotes. Guard dogs, llamas. I don't know too much about that. I see them around sometimes. I don't know how effective, but that is something. And one of the things, I've gone out on quite a few calf predation calls, and you go out there, and something that's kind of common is, did that coyote kill that calf, or did that calf die from something else, and those coyotes were just eating it after it was dead? And, you know, one of the things you can do is, if you ever shoot a deer and you're skinning it, whether it's a bow or a rifle, you see all that hemorrhaging under the skin. That deer was alive, it's bleeding. Same way with those calves. Sometimes you don't see that hemorrhaging under the skin, and you know, that calf could have died of exposure or something else, and those coyotes come in after the fact. So you kind of have to really identify whether it was scavenged or something that the coyotes killed. And if you're talking about deer, that's your main concern on fawn survival and trying to keep the coyotes away, your best bet is simply just better habitat. You know, leave a little more grass in pastures, and the more habitat they have, the better survival those fawns will have, whether there's predators there or not. Out in western Kansas, we're currently doing a deer study, trying to get some results on what's causing our mule deer decline out there. And some of the early results, I won't go into too much detail here, but the does are having their fawns out in completely open areas, maybe a wheat field or something, and it's kind of I don't know if that's a reaction to, you know, coyotes, because those fawns don't have much scent for the first week or so, and but those does are collared, and in June they'll track those does, go out there when they know that they've probably had their fawns, and they'll find those fawns, and so far there's been about 40% fawn survival, which isn't very good. And there's a lot of things that can cause high fawn mortality, and just like back in 2011 and 12 when we had a drought, even in Kingman and Reno counties, I do spotlight deer surveys. We saw 0 fawns those 2 years. I mean, a lot of times if the habitat conditions are so poor, those fawns will just sometimes abandon their fawns. Yeah, they don't have the energy to feed them. So they're and like right now, when we're doing these surveys, we're seeing a lot of fawns out there. Habitat conditions are really good. Out in western Kansas on this study, one of the things, because they are having them out in open fields, some of the highest mortality, you know, when you're talking about these fawns, is farm equipment, malnutrition, and exposure. And this year was kind of different. They're still haven't got the results back, but they're looking at it. They found a lot of dead fawns that nothing had killed them. They're almost certain that it was just exposure, because in June, when they were having those fawns, we had pretty unusually cool temperatures and some rain out there. And there were some predation from coyotes, but it wasn't too high. And in Idaho, there was a study that they had 2 really large tracts of land. They intensively managed and killed, tried to remove all the coyotes and mountain lions from this one range and not from the other. And after 9 years, there was no significant difference of deer population. And basically, in wildlife biology, there's, you have compensatory or additive mortality. And basically what that means is, and that kind of goes with this study, is, you have a certain number of fawns are not going to make it that first spring. So if you take out all the predators, you would think that would just make more fawns, live through the fall. It doesn't really work that way. That just, sometimes that means some other mortality factor, whether it be disease or starvation or something, will increase. Here's just a few slides of some pelt prices of this last year. And you can see coyote is really the only one that increased from the previous year. There's a few down here, but if you're talking about $3 for a raccoon, no one really cares. No one's going to be really going to all the work to sell a bunch of raccoon pelts. But because of that, because the coyotes are decent price, here is just kind of when their pelts are prime, mid-November all the way through mid-February is kind of when they're most prime. And this slide just shows how the pelt price corresponds with our harvest of coyotes in the state of Kansas. And you can see this last year we had the highest harvest of coyotes that we've ever had. That since 1970 anyway, and it just correlates perfectly with the price that people are getting for pelts. So, anybody have any questions on this first part? If not, I want to talk just a little bit about mountain lions, another predator that's in Kansas. And I got this presentation from Matt Peak. He's our biologist in Emporia. And there's a couple slides that are outdated, but we'll talk about it. They were native to Kansas, late 1800s, early 1900s, and the last historical verified documentation that we had in Kansas was in Ellis County in 1904. And through the 60s and 70s, there was some protection for them, the return of a lot of prey species, and there started to kind of be a recurrence of mountain lions. The green is kind of their range, and this is the cougar network. And this is verified reports of mountain lions throughout each of their known range. And this is something that's been kind of slowly progressing, for 20 years. So where do the mountain lions that we found in Kansas, where are they coming from? What we found out that most of them are coming from the Black Hills. There was kind of an island population up there. And that population really went up. There wasn't any hunting up there. Generally it was young males would disperse trying to find a new territory for themselves. And so several of the mountain lions that we've documented in Kansas, genetically, we know that they came from that population in the Black Hills. So when Matt made this presentation, there was 9 confirmed mountain lions in Kansas. And since that time, the first one was down in Barber County, but since that time, I think we're at like 26 right now, confirmed sightings. We've either got our hands on the cat or we've seen trail cam photos or something. But 26 at this point. These are some of this is the trail cam photo, or somebody took a cell photo. This was in Trigo County, I believe. Guy put out a little bit of corn for his deer hunt, I think. And he probably wasn't too excited to get down out of the stand that night. I don't know. But we do have some nice trail cam photos that are just, indisputable evidence. There's the third lion that we documented in Kansas was taken into captivity near Firestone, Colorado. It was something that I think they darted. It was close to a town. It was causing some problems, so they released it near Estes Park in October. And those young males, a lot of times, like I mentioned, they're looking for their own territory. That mountain lion, Colorado Division of Wildlife put a tracking collar on that mountain lion. And so it gets uploaded every 3 hours. It puts out a ping on where this cat's located. And that cat went right back down to the original place where they caught it, and it kind of overshot and kept going east. Well, it came in to the state of Kansas and made that trip March 2nd, 2010, and it left March 26th. Clear up in the northwest corner, and then he went out of Kansas in the southwest corner in 24 days. So that kind of just shows you how far and how fast those young males can travel. And went through Oklahoma, Texas, ended up down in New Mexico. Here is Nebraska had their department had let us know that there was a mountain lion sighting up in Nebraska, real close to the Kansas border. And then we started, especially now with the trail cams, they're everywhere. Almost every deer hunter has one, and they're always out. And we started getting trail cam photos and actual people that saw them, and we could document. And that state, or that cat went through the state, and it has some distinguishing characteristics on it, so we know it was the same cat. And then Oklahoma started getting reports of that same mountain lion. So of our 26 or so confirmed, this counts as 5, but we're positive that was the same cat. Just some differences in their tracks. A lot of times we'll get called out, and you might see a track that's this big, but you can distinctively see the claws, the pads. They're dog tracks. And sometimes people get upset with this, but there's just some differences in there in the symmetry of the toes, the lateral shape of the toe shape. But for me, it's the hind edge of this heel. There's 3 pads there, whereas dogs, coyote and the domestic dogs just have 2. And the leading edge of that back pad is real pointed on dogs, and it's kind of flat off of that on cats. And you don't see those claws in the tracks of a coyote, or a bobcat or a mountain lion. The only thing I wanted to say here was, if you see a mountain lion, just their mere presence, you can't kill a mountain lion. Now, if they are, and this is probably more for Scott on the law enforcement side, but if they're out there in your livestock and they're causing damage, and you see one that's killing a calf or something, then you can take those. Really, I think it goes for any animal. If it's found in or near buildings or destroying property. So but just the mere presence, it's not legal to shoot a mountain lion. We get tons and tons of people sending us trail cam photos, and a lot of them look like this, you know, and sometimes people get mad at us because we can't, this isn't verification. It really, really looks like a mountain lion to me. You know, it almost looks like there's a, you know, that tail especially. And it's got, looks to me like there's just a little bit of a black on the end, but you know, it's something that we can't verify 100%. And then about a week after we got that photo, we got this one from their neighbor. The neighbor's dog is roams countryside, and if you look, it has that big old thick tail and a little bit of black on the end of it. So is that what it was? Probably. And we also get a lot of, I'm sure everyone in here has heard them, that Wildlife and Parks is releasing them. Somebody showed up and they killed a mountain lion, and they showed up and they took the cat out of the freezer because it was tagged. None of those are true. I've never really quite figured out, because they are such a neat animal. I think it's something that people, they want to see. And now that we are starting to, you know, starting to become more common, I was hoping that maybe that phenomenon would go away, but it sure hasn't. We get pictures. I mean, I bet I get 2 or 3 a month of trail cam photos, and photos like this. Like this even made the Topeka Capital Journal. You know, buddy sent this photo of his friend posing with a cougar hit my car near Ottawa. Kansas Fish and Game Commission had to put the cat down. It's just completely false. There was, and one of the things that I do is you can Google these photos, and I mean that was just a legally killed cat from Montana or Wyoming or somewhere. But somebody starts, you know, sharing all these photos, and next thing you know, it's killed in Kansas. So you have to be real careful on what you're passing around. Here's another one that's real common. I see on Facebook a lot. There's 3 cats, and when I saw it, it was southeast of Mulvane. You know, you can copy and paste these and Google these photos and see where they come from. And that was not in Kansas. So we do have mountain lions. I hear that a lot. It's like, why does Wildlife and Parks deny that we have mountain lions? We don't. They are here at least occasionally. You know, the main thing is almost all of them, all but one, I think, have been young males. There was a female that was killed up in Rooks County by some hunters. Or no, the hunters were out in this field and they found one dead, and that was a female. That's the only one that I know of that was a female. So those young males, they take out looking for a new territory, and they'll cross Kansas. And honestly, we have all the prey they need, but we just don't have all of their habitat requirements. I mean, for me, if I think if one was going to have like a breeding pair, male and female, to have their own territory, it might be southwest Barber County, southeast Comanche County, where there's so many canyons and caves, and somewhere where they could den. I could see that maybe happening, but for the most part, they're not resident animals. They're just young mountain lions, you know, just kind of passing through the state. And that one that I mentioned, the one that went through Kansas, the one was from Colorado. That cat, no one out there in the 24 days it was in the state of Kansas, not one person reported it. And they could tell from the caller that cat traveled mostly during the day to move. They're just so secretive, and they're just like ghosts out there. I mean, they're so hard to see. And then when he would, all of a sudden on the map, you'd start seeing in a close area, you know, him going back and forth. He would rest up for a couple days, maybe a shelter belt or something like that. And they would go out and see if they could find any kill sites or what he had been eating. And there was no livestock or deer that were killed from that mountain lion in the time he was in Kansas. It was all small game. It was rabbits. The most common item that he killed and ate was raccoons. So I know this is a talk on coyotes, but I just wanted to mention a little bit on mountain lions because I know that's something that people are worried about, people talk about. So we do, there's no question, we've had mountain lions in the state. So, any questions on this part or anything more on coyotes? All right, thank you very much.